Have you ever felt like you were being swallowed up by your emotions? A sudden wave of anger, a deep, lingering sadness, or a feeling of anxiety that makes you feel suffocated, even though you're not exactly sure why. And you start to think, I must be negative, I must be weak to be so sad. But what if I told you that you are not your emotions? This is not a comforting statement. This is a truth few of us are ever taught. Emotions come and go, like waves in the ocean. They can be real, they can be strong, but they are temporary. They don't stay, they aren't fixed, and they don't define you. But from a young age, we grow up with an underlying belief. If I am angry, then I am hot-tempered. If I am sad, then I am weak. If I am anxious, then there is something wrong with me. These fleeting emotions become labels attached to our identities. And so we become identified with our emotions. We lose sight of ourselves, of our anger, of our sadness. They all become one. Here's the problem. When you identify with your emotions, you live in an invisible prison that you don't even know you've entered. You believe that you are your emotions. Then you act as if that's true. You reject opportunities, avoid challenges, have low self-esteem, anxiety, self-doubt, all because you believe, I am that person. Identifying with your emotions is one of the silent causes of depression. Anxiety, self-judgment, and even a sense of lostness. It takes away your control over your life, your ability to choose how you respond, and most importantly, it takes away your inner freedom. I used to be stuck in that loop. Some days, a glance from someone would make me doubt myself. A gentle word would throw me off track for the rest of the day. And I would believe that I must be weak. But after a while, I began to realize that belief was the root of the problem. Emotions are not to blame, but believing that emotions are you is what keeps you stuck. Everything really changed when I started asking a simple question. Am I observing my emotions, or am I being controlled by my emotions? That question was like a mirror. For the first time, I saw myself, not the anger, not the fear, but the person who was seeing all those emotions. When you observe an emotion, you are no longer controlled by it. When you see it coming, and know it will go, you no longer react instinctively. You have a choice. You are free, and in that moment, you begin to take back control of your life. You can't control everything that happens in your life, but you can always control how you react. And to do that, you need to understand this. You have emotions, but you are not them. Anger is not you. Sadness is not you. Anxiety, worry, despair, none of these are you. They are just visitors. Your job is not to fight or run, but to learn to observe with equanimity, with compassion, and with a steady heart. The journey to freeing yourself from emotional identification begins right here, a question, an awareness, and when you truly understand that, you will see you are so much more powerful than you ever believed. When you look up at the sky, do you notice that the weather is constantly changing? Some days are sunny, some are rainy, some are cloudy, some are bright, but you would never confuse the sky with the storm, would you? The sky is the background, the storm is just a passing part. And in the same way, you are not your emotions. Emotions are just mental weather. It sounds simple, but think back to the last time you felt angry, frustrated, or hurt. That emotion overshadowed every thought. every action, and made you act as if, I am this anger, I am this sadness, and when the emotion is so strong, it becomes your identity, it defines you, at least for that moment. But here's the truth. Emotions aren't entities. They're signals. Every emotion you feel, whether it's joy, anger, hurt, or panic, is a result of a series of thoughts, memories, and perceptions going on in your brain. It's like a program running in the background, and the emotion is the notification that pops up on the screen. For example, someone says something offensive. Immediately, emotions flare up. Your face feels hot. Your heart races. You may feel attacked. But where does that feeling come from? From your interpretation of what was said in a particular way. From past experiences that are triggered. And from the belief that I am being disrespected. Emotions are just a consequence, not an absolute truth. This is an important distinction. There is a big difference between I feel angry and I am angry. See, one is a fleeting state. The other is an identity. One can be observed, adjusted. The other is an iron cage you put yourself in. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor of ancient Rome, once said, "You can feel angry, but you are not obligated to act on that anger." That is the true power of an emotionally mature person. And don't think of emotions as your enemy. They're not bad. In fact, they're necessary. Anger, if you channel it, can help you stand up for what's right. Sadness, if you don't run away from it, can help you connect more deeply with what's important in your life. Anxiety, if you listen, may be telling you something needs to change. But only by separating yourself from those emotions can you stop being controlled by them. The problem is, most of us have never learned to stand apart from our emotions. We live reactively, not intentionally. We are driven by our emotions, thinking we are driving ourselves. And because we don't recognize the difference between feeling something and being something, we easily get carried away. I want you to imagine this. If every emotion is just a wave, then you are not the wave. You are the ocean. The wave comes and goes. But the ocean is still there, deep, quiet, and vast. When you remember that, you are no longer afraid of emotions. You do not need to suppress them. You just don't identify yourself with them. And from there, you begin to regain your freedom. Have you ever wondered why you are so easily controlled by your emotions? Why is it that just a careless word, a casual glance, or even a fleeting memory is enough to sweep you away? We know that emotions are fleeting, but we still cling to them, as if they are who we are. The truth is, a lot of it comes down to the way our brains are designed. Your brain isn't designed to make you happy, it's designed to protect you from harm. Your brain's number one priority is survival, so it reacts very quickly and very strongly to threats, to pain, to anything that makes you feel unsafe. Whether it's an unpleasant look or an unpleasant memory, your brain registers it and reacts immediately. And then, those reactions, repeatedly, become a portrait of you in your mind. If you're anxious, you start to believe that you're anxious. If you're angry, you start to label yourself as angry. And so on. Every emotion you experience becomes a false picture of yourself that you believe is real. But that's not all. The brain is only one part. The other part, and even deeper, is the environment you grow up in. your family, your culture, your society. All of it leaves its mark on how you perceive emotions. You may have heard things like, "Men don't cry," "Angry women are not gentle," "Be happy when you're sad," "Don't be so negative." These statements may seem harmless, but they are the programming that makes us label emotions as bad. And from there, we learn to either suppress them or identify with them as if they were inherently flawed. I remember a close friend of mine who, after losing her job, didn't dare tell anyone that she felt disappointed and hurt. She just forced a smile and said, "I'm fine. It will pass." But deep inside, she felt like a failure, unworthy, worthless. Her feelings were not acknowledged, they were suppressed. And because they weren't understood, they grew into a fear that was tied to her identity. We live in a fast-paced world where people learn to hide rather than face. No one teaches us how to observe emotions from the outside. No one shows us that emotions are visitors, not hosts. So we live without being fully conscious. We react to everything, a word, a situation, a memory, without knowing that we are being led by our emotions like a sleepwalker. And when our reactions become habits, we lose the ability to distinguish between our emotions and our true selves. A momentary anger is enough to convince us that I am a bad person. A failure makes us think, I can't do anything right. These thoughts are not true. They are the result of living too long in unconsciousness, too little in awareness. But the good news is, things can change. You just have to start asking yourself, where is this reaction coming from? Am I being conditioned? Is this feeling real, or is it just familiar? When you ask these questions, you are no longer the one being dragged along. You become the one standing back, observing, and from there, taking control. Because in the end, you are not your emotions. You are the one seeing them, and that awareness is the beginning of freedom. Sometimes it's not the emotion that makes you miserable, but what you believe about yourself after the emotion has passed. Once you get angry, you start thinking, I'm a hot-tempered person. Once you feel anxious, you label yourself, I'm an insecure person. And if you repeat that over and over in your head, over time, it becomes more than just a passing emotion. It becomes an identity. But here's the danger. When you turn your emotions into your identity, you're building an invisible prison for yourself, and you hold the key. I once knew a friend who was very talented, very capable, and was always highly regarded by her colleagues. But because she couldn't control her emotions at work a few times, she began to believe, I am a weak person. And then, instead of being proactive, she withdrew. Instead of engaging, she chose safety. Just because of a few emotions, a few moments, she turned that into the truth about herself. See, emotions aren't bad, but when we let them label us, we begin to limit our growth. A person who says, I'm negative, is afraid to open up. A person who believes, I'm afraid, is never going to step outside their comfort zone. And eventually, their life isn't being lived, it's just being kept. Are you in that zone? The emotional comfort zone? The zone where you'd rather keep things normal than challenge yourself. Where your emotions, not your dreams, are determining the direction of your life. Think about it. How many times have you wanted to start something new, a project, a relationship, a positive change, but then felt anxious? Afraid of failure and stopped? You procrastinated. You made excuses. But in reality, it was the emotion of that moment that drove your entire decision. We don't realize it, but every time we let our emotions lead the way, we slowly lose control of our lives. When we're sad, we withdraw. When we're angry, we react. When we're anxious, we procrastinate. Slowly, our emotions become the driver of our journey. And you, the one who should really be behind the wheel, are sitting in the backseat. Silent. This is not only dangerous, it's unfortunate. Because you weren't born to live as a victim of your emotions. You were born to understand emotions, to learn from them, and then to rise above them, like a true adult. The question is, do you want to take back control? Do you want to break out of the mental prison you've created with statements like, "I'm this kind of person"? Do you dare to step out of your emotional comfort zone, where you're protected from failure, but also stripped of any possibility of growth? Because if so, the first thing you need to do is stop labeling yourself. Emotions are okay to come and go, but you don't have to let them define you. Whenever you feel vulnerable, scared, or anxious, simply say, "I'm feeling this way." Don't say, "I am this way." You are not the rain. You are the sky. Emotions may come and go, but you are always the one who stays. And when you live from that position, the position of the observer, the master, you will see, emotions are no longer barriers. They become mirrors, showing you the way to where you truly belong. There's something the Stoics understood thousands of years ago, and if you grasp it, it will change your life forever. They understood, you can't control the world, but you can control yourself. None of us can choose everything that happens to us, but we can choose how we respond to it. Epictetus, a slave turned philosopher, once said, "It's not what happens to you that makes you miserable. It's how you think about it." It sounds simple, but it's at the heart of inner freedom. When something negative happens, your first instinct is to react, to judge, to get angry, to get upset, to panic. But if you stop and ask yourself, "How am I seeing this?" you've begun to step out of the emotional trap. That's why the Stoics don't teach you to fight your emotions, but to learn to recognize them and transform them with reason. They don't deny anger, fear, or sadness. They observe it. They detach from it. They question it. A Stoic, when angry, will not say, "I am angry," as if anger were an identity. Instead, he will write, "I feel angry because I feel offended." That may seem like a small statement, but it is powerful, because you have now broken down the emotion into its cause, and when you understand the cause, you can choose the appropriate response. You are no longer a victim, you are an agent. I did a simple experiment. Every time a negative emotion came up, instead of reacting, I wrote it down, not in a venting way, but describing it as an outsider. I'm nervous about tomorrow's meeting. I'm feeling insecure about being compared. Just by doing that small act, I found some distance from the emotion, and that distance gave me the space to make better choices. Marcus Aurelius, an emperor and a Stoic, wrote in his diary, "Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space lies your freedom." We often think of freedom as doing what we want, but real freedom is the ability to choose how to respond, even when emotions are at their strongest. And the gap Marcus talks about, it doesn't have to be long. It just has to be there. Imagine you're driving down the road, and someone cuts you off. Your first reaction might be to get angry, honk your horn, swear. But if you recognize that you're angry, you've created a moment of disconnection. You can choose to be silent. And in doing so, you've taken back control. Stoicism doesn't make you rigid or cold. On the contrary, it helps you stay grounded in the midst of emotional storms. It doesn't tell you to run away from your emotions, but teaches you to face them with awareness. Because you are not your anger, sadness, or fear. You are the one who observes all of these emotions and chooses to respond in a way that is true to your values. That is true bravery, and when you practice that, you will begin to feel calm, not because life is easier, but because you know you are no longer a slave to your emotions. Knowing that you are not your feelings is the first step, but to truly live like that, you need something more important: practice. Because without practice, knowledge is just in your head, but with practice, it becomes a force in your heart and action. So how do you detach from your emotions in a concrete way in your daily life? How do you not get caught up in them when anger arises? When fear sets in, or when you feel like everything is against you? The simplest way to do this is to change the language you use to talk about your emotions. Instead of saying, "I am angry," try saying, "I am feeling angry." It may sound small, but it is a big cognitive shift. Because when you say, "I am," you are merging with the emotion. When you say, "I am feeling," you are dissociating yourself from it. If you want to go further, imagine yourself as a third person observing yourself, like watching a movie with you as the main character. Try saying, "He is angry," "She is worried." Immediately, you will see that a distance is created between you and the emotion. And in that distance, you can think, choose, and no longer be controlled by the emotion. Another incredibly powerful and underrated tool is keeping an emotions journal. When a strong emotion comes up, don't just endure it, write it down. What triggered the emotion? How did I react? And most importantly, what did I learn from it? Writing it down helps you see things more clearly and logically. It's like taking the emotion out of your system and putting it on a table for you to observe. And in doing so, you can remove the false labels you've been putting on yourself for so long. Another indispensable practice, especially in today's fast-paced society, is mindfulness and stillness. Stop for a moment, take a deep breath, exhale slowly. Don't rush. Just sit there and observe your emotions like clouds drifting across the sky. They come and go. Your job is not to resist them or hold them back, just to notice. The first time you practice, it may feel uncomfortable. We are used to reacting immediately. But if you persevere, you will discover a miracle. Emotions are only strong when you resist them. But when you observe them with equanimity, they gradually lose their power. And finally, if you want to have a deeper dialogue with your emotions, learn to ask questions. When a negative emotion arises, instead of avoiding it or acting on it, ask yourself, what is this emotion trying to tell me? It may be trying to warn you of something. Or, is there any real evidence for this thought? Sometimes what you think is true is just a false assumption. And remember to ask, have I overcome this emotion before? The answer is usually yes. And that reminds you that you are stronger than you think. These types of questions are called the Socratic technique, a method of questioning that the Stoics loved to use to separate truth from illusion. When you learn to ask and answer honestly, you are using reason. Let your mind lead the way, not your emotions. And then, over time, you will no longer be afraid of your emotions. You will no longer have to suppress or assimilate. You will feel free, because you are no longer reacting unconsciously. We're often too hard on ourselves, especially when negative emotions arise. Have you ever said things like, "I'm negative," "I'm insecure," or "I'm weak"? These seemingly harmless labels can become ingrained in your mind over time, as if they were true. But today, I want you to stop for a second and ask yourself, are you really those emotions? Or are you just feeling them in the moment? The truth is, we all have ups and downs. Some days you feel energized. Some days you just want to hide from the world. Some days you feel hopeful. Some days you feel confused and exhausted. It's not a mistake. It's the most normal thing to be human. You're not negative. You're just feeling negative. And that feeling will pass, if you don't hold onto it and call it me. Many people think that maturity is the absence of negative emotions. That a strong person will never be sad, never worry, never be disappointed. But that is a dangerous misunderstanding. Because the more you try to eliminate emotions, the more you are controlled by them. Emotions are not something you need to eliminate. They are your allies, if you learn to listen. Imagine an emotion as a child knocking on the door of your heart. If you scold it and chase it away, it will scream even louder. But if you open the door and say, "Hello, sad, I see you. I'll sit with you for a while," you will notice something strange. The emotion becomes calmer. Because it no longer has to fight for recognition. I remember one time, after a presentation where I felt like I had done poorly, I got caught up in the feeling of disappointment and self-blame. In the past, I would have forced myself to think positive or pretend nothing had happened. But that day, I did something different. I sat still, closed my eyes, and just said in my head, "Okay, disappointment, I hear you. I understand why you showed up." And within a few minutes, the feeling was no longer as strong as before. I still felt it, but I was no longer driven by it. It's the difference between suppression and selective acceptance. Mature people aren't people who don't feel anything. They're people who know when to listen and when to let it go. They don't try to shut everything down inside, but they also don't let their emotions run their lives. Think of emotions as tools, each with its own uses. Anger, understood and channeled properly, can be a source of strength to speak the truth and stand up for what is right. Sadness, accepted, can help you connect more deeply with yourself or with others. Emotions only become dangerous when you don't know when you're using them or being used by them. So don't label yourself by your emotions. Instead, practice understanding. Observe them, name them, talk to them as your friend, not your enemy. And from that understanding, you will find transformation, no longer resistance, but integration, no longer denial, but growth. Ultimately, you don't need to be perfect. You just need to be honest with yourself and kind to your feelings. Because it's through that kindness that you'll learn to live more deeply, more freely, and more authentically. In the end, we all have to deal with emotions. No one can ever completely eliminate sadness. anger, fear, or disappointment, but you don't have to. You just have to not let them control you. You have feelings, but you are not them. This is not just a philosophical statement. It is a real key. A person who understands this will no longer live in a state of constant reaction. They will no longer let anger dictate their words, fear hold them back, sadness make them doubt their own worth. Detaching yourself from your emotions does not make you cold or insensitive. On the contrary, it makes you more alert, more thoughtful, and more free, because you begin to live not by instinct, but by choice. Not by habit, but by awareness. Imagine this. A person lives their whole life in a state of insecurity, believing, I am weak. If they change just one belief, I just feel weak. But I am not weak, their entire life changes. They go from shyness to stepping outside their comfort zone. From silence to acceptance. They learn to speak up for what they want. From reacting emotionally, they start choosing to act in ways that are consistent with their values. We often think of personal change as a huge, complicated journey, but the truth is, the biggest changes start with a simple realization: I can detach myself from my emotions. And when you truly understand that, you begin to live differently. You are no longer a victim of your emotions, you become their guide. I want you to remember this. Your emotions are not your enemies. They are messengers. They come to tell you that there is something inside you that needs to be heard. But like the postman, they knock on your door, deliver your message, and then leave. You can read it and decide. But if you give them the steering wheel of your life, you will be lost. Listen to your emotions. Feel them. But don't let them define who you are or what you do. Use them as a compass, not a rudder. Because ultimately, you are in control. You choose how you live, how you react, and how you grow from what you feel. And if you're on a journey of change, if you've ever been overwhelmed by emotions, mislabeled yourself, reacted in habitual ways that you later regretted, now is the time to start again. No need to wait for a big change. No need to change your life. Just stop, breathe, and say, I have this feeling, but I am not it. One word, one realization, one profound change, and from there, you'll see. True freedom doesn't lie in controlling everything. It lies in the ability to not let anything inside control you. If you feel like what I shared today has touched a part of you, don't let it stop here. Please like this video if you found it helpful, because just one click from you could send it to someone who needs to hear this. Subscribe to the channel to continue the journey of cultivating inner strength together, because this journey not only requires patience, but also requires a supportive community. And I would love to hear your story. Have you ever let an emotion define you? What in this video makes you think the most? Please leave a comment below, not only so I can hear from you, but so we can hear from each other.